Day for a closed-door meeting ahead of next month's Leaders' Summit. The effort centers on maintaining operational unity without major policy shifts. For the alliance, stability is key, as Russian officials are expected to highlight any visible divisions. The next NATO summit will be a crucial test of how well RUT can balance U.S. demands with the concerns of other member states. Watch the agenda closely for any announced adjustments to burden-sharing targets.
Good evening, everyone. In Honolulu, Hawaii, now 75 degrees F with scattered rain showers. In Chicago, Illinois, now 63 degrees F with patchy fog. In Atlanta, Georgia, now 69 degrees F with mostly sunny skies. In Los Angeles, California, now 64 degrees F with patchy fog. Stay tuned for more updates.
3 big moves this cycle. First, using flattery, Rutte tries to ease tensions with Trump. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte visited the White House and sought to reduce friction with President Trump. He employed a strategy combining compliments with measured counterpoints on alliance issues. Meanwhile, Trump cancels plan to sign major housing bill as he fights with Congress over the SAVE Act. President Trump withdrew from a scheduled signing of a bipartisan housing measure. He tied approval to passage of the SAVE Act in Congress. The move extends a standoff between the White House and lawmakers over election-related legislation. And finally, Zelensky orders preemptive strikes on Russian war facilities as drone campaign intensifies. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has directed preemptive strikes against Russian facilities used to support military operations. The order coincides with an expanded Ukrainian drone campaign.
The Trump administration on Wednesday asked Congress for $88 billion in supplemental funding. This money is needed to cover the Iran war, Ebola response, and farm aid. For taxpayers, this means higher federal spending that could impact deficits and future tax policy. The package also has implications for defense contractors and agricultural markets. The Senate is set to vote on the bill, and the House Appropriations Committee will mark it up next. 1776, the year we typically mark as the birth of the United States, may have been a pivotal moment, but the real start of our nation's story dates back to the 1600. At the Wadsworth Athenaeum, an old oak tree and hookers party, judges in a cave, point to a much earlier time. This counter-narrative challenges our conventional timeline, suggesting that the seeds of American democracy were sown long before the famous 1776. It invites us to reconsider the origins of our nation and the enduring spirit that has shaped it over centuries. J.P. Morgan Chase announced a $50 billion buyback following the Federal Reserve's stress test. Meanwhile, Goldman Sachs raised its dividend. All 32 large banks cleared the hypothetical recession scenario. Higher capital returns can support bank stock valuations and 401(k) holdings for retirees and investors. Let's unpack this. Using flattery, Rutte tries to ease tensions with Trump. Here's why it matters. NATO alliance management affects U.S. defense spending commitments and collective security arrangements that involve American troops and resources in Europe. The bottom line? Monitor upcoming NATO summit agendas or defense spending announcements for signs of policy shifts. One view, through a civil liberties lens. No direct civil liberties implications arise from the diplomatic exchange. The International Criminal Court judges in Washington have taken legal action against the Trump administration, suing over sanctions imposed on court personnel. This challenge could affect U.S. diplomatic leverage and accountability mechanisms abroad. From a household perspective, these costs ultimately draw from public revenues. The America First view argues that sovereign authority protects national interests. From an institutional standpoint, federal courts will assess jurisdiction and statutory authority. Civil liberties advocates see it as a test of executive powers versus judicial review. National security proponents argue sanctions serve as tools to influence behavior and protect alliances. Adversary perspectives expect Chinese state outlets to portray this as evidence of U.S. overreach. Monitor the U.S. District Court for initial hearings on the complaint. The Senate Judiciary Committee is holding a hearing today on birthright citizenship. Lawmakers are examining whether current interpretations of the 14th Amendment should be revisited. The debate centers on national sovereignty and control over immigration inflows, but it also impacts access to public benefits and legal protections for families. The committee will hear testimony on constitutional history and the practical effects of citizenship policies. Watch for the committee's reports or subsequent legislation for any proposed changes to citizenship documentation requirements.
An oil tanker has sailed out of the Strait of Hormuz via a UN-recommended route near Oman, defying threats by Iran that any ship not following the Tehran-advised path could be attacked. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, touring Gulf nations, stressed Thursday that the waters of the Strait of Hormuz do not belong to anyone but the international community. For American consumers, higher crude prices mean increased pump prices for gasoline and diesel. Major oil producers outside the Gulf see their revenues rise, while Asian refiners face elevated feedstock costs and potential supply delays. As tensions simmer, monitoring daily tanker tracking data and any new Iranian naval statements for escalation signals will be key.
Washington is pushing for a deal with Iran, but at no cost. U.S. officials are visiting Gulf partners affected by recent conflict, assuring them of a tough stance. Iranian suspicions about internal U.S. policy coordination have reportedly increased. Any accord could influence global energy prices and shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, affecting Gulf producers and potentially escalating tensions. Monitor next scheduled talks for progress. China has escalated tensions with the free world, shutting down several churches and arresting prominent religious leaders. The crackdown has left communities in shock and international condemnation growing. Governments worldwide are grappling with how to respond, with some calling for sanctions and others urging diplomacy. The next move could signal a shift in the international community's stance on Chinese human rights abuses. Senate Republicans rejected an Iran war powers resolution late Wednesday, reversing their earlier support after a heated meeting with President Trump. The vote shift followed a fractious Capitol confrontation. The episode tests statutory war powers procedures and the Senate's role in checking executive action. Here's what matters about this one. Trump cancels plan to sign major housing bill as he fights with Congress over the SAVE Act. Here's why it matters. The delay affects federal housing policy that influences mortgage availability and home construction costs for American homeowners and buyers. Prolonged uncertainty can slow housing supply growth and keep prices elevated in many markets. Advocates of stricter voter identification rules gain leverage in the legislative standoff. On the other side, bipartisan sponsors of the housing bill lose momentum for near-term enactment. There's a money angle, too. Federal housing programs and mortgage market stability face further delay, which can affect lending volumes and homebuilder revenues. The bottom line? Watch for the next House or Senate vote